Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be back here. Actually, I've been here for a couple days, and I've learned a few terms. A few local brummies, if that's correct, have shown me around. And actually, what was interesting about the trip was something really encouraging, especially coming from the US. We've seen our manufacturing base get decimated. So I was sitting on the plane with a Rolls-Royce exec, and she was telling me something very interesting. Rolls is reinvesting back in the UK. They're stopping some of the outsourcing. They're bringing up their apprentice programs, and they are going full force to bring manufacturing jobs back into the UK. Isn't that exciting? That's pretty impressive, and it bears some hope for us in the US as well. And it's something I was thinking about because I was coming around here and thinking, this is the heart of manufacturing in the UK. I went my way to Coventry, which is very impressive, and then I was like, there's nothing here except for this beautiful church. And then I realized that this is what's happening. This is what's been going on. And part of this is what's happening in terms of the pace of change that's happening in the marketplace. If you think about the trends that we've gone through, 5 years ago, we're sitting here talking about SOA, right? Everything's going to be SOA. 3 years ago, we're in the middle of a global financial crisis. We were looking at cloud. And then the last few years, it's been about social and mobile. That's a big shift in 5 years. And in that time frame, big topics have emerged. Consumerization of IT has become big. The power of what we can do at home sometimes exceeds our ability to do stuff at work. At the same time, we're seeing a change in terms of where the future of the CIO is headed. What is the CIO role? What do they do? What's next for that individual? And then also what's happening in the marketplace is we're seeing that the transactional systems that we've had in the past, these systems of record, are shifting. We're moving to systems that have some level of sensing and respond as we move to engagement. And while this is happening, we're also going to spend some time talking about some of the pains that SAP customers are going through, how to get past it and fund innovation through optimization, and then, of course, talk through some of these next steps and ways to adopt new technologies. So a lot is changing, a lot is happening, and as this Dilbert cartoon explains, life in the ERP world is still not the same. Wouldn't you like some software with your hardware? So these things aren't easy. And as we move to this, as you can see, we haven't progressed much, right? We've evolved, but we're still hunched over. Despite all the changes that have occurred, despite the evolution, if you believe in evolution, as some of my colleagues in the US might not. But think about this. We are shifting. We are shifting. And this consumerization of IT trend is huge. It's big. It's happening. Now, some of you may have seen this before. There are 4 forces of change at work. And this pace of change is happening at a rapid rate. It's happening faster than we can imagine. And there are 3 forces we can control and one that's completely out of control. We can't control when gold prices are going up, when we have labor unrest, when we're occupying things. All this stuff is out of our control. So don't worry about that one, but there's a lot of it going around. It's distracting. However, there are 3 forces of change we can control. The one around workforce dynamics. We have 5 generations of workers in the same workplace. And this is from digital natives, people who grew up with the web and the internet and being connected, to people who grew up post-war, who started out with analog systems, basic mechanics, machinery. Where we work, when we work, how we work, what we work on, and even why we work are really different. People have different expectations. Even from my perspective, my cousin, who's about 18, cannot have a conversation with me face to face. She's always looking at her device. In fact, I could be standing next to her and she'd be texting me. Right? That's the level of change that we're seeing in the marketplace. That third change that's happening, which impacts our ability to work, is really business models. And we've talked about this in the past, but business models are changing very quickly. In fact, we've got products that are often used as excuses to sell services. And this is changing the way we work. And if you think about this, even just how companies have changed, at the height of the global financial crisis, The symbol of American might and manufacturing was General Motors. What do you think General Motors was worth, market cap, in 2009? Anyone want to take a venture? How many billions of dollars? Zero. Close. Anybody else? 4 billion. What was Google worth? Hearing some answers. 167 billion. What could Google have done for fun? Buy General Motors and shut it down, right? Google doesn't sell anything but ads and search. These aren't real tangible goods, but there seems to be more value in those things. And as you think about your businesses today, we're selling services, we're selling installation, we're selling warranties, we're selling additional items not necessarily related back to our core. And that's because the business models are changing. And that's increasing our ability and our perception of this pace of change. And then, of course, the last thing is technology adoption. It's happening very quickly. We just talked about, in these 5-year period, we've gone from these big concepts to now big data and mobile and social and cloud and analytics. And these are important concepts. These are 5 changes that are going to be with us for the next decade. And more importantly, these 5 changes are going to be with us in the enterprise. So what's mobile? Well, this is the new interface. In fact, when we look around at technology companies around the world, they develop for mobile first, desktop second. You're seeing that as well with the number of people on mobile devices. There's quite a proliferation. What do we do with social? Social is the network. It's the connectivity. It's not anything different than what we were doing before as humans, but we're transcending space and time with technology now to connect ourselves and to find those connections that we can reach out to. Cloud. What is cloud? Well, at the end of the day, cloud is this big information store inside the sky. And that cloud is providing data that gets pushed into our mobile devices, that get connected through our networks, and then we need some intelligence on top of that, which is the analytics. And then you add UC with video, and that's how we create this collaboration. That's why these 5 forces are going to play a huge role in our enterprises, and they're happening very quickly. Take social, for example. How many of you guys are on Twitter? Raise your hands. So look around, not too many, but still probably a third of you. How many of you guys are on Facebook? Look, more hands are up. How many of you are on LinkedIn? Everybody. Why is that? Anybody? It's your job, it's your career, it's a network. You have a self-interest to be in LinkedIn. And in fact, LinkedIn is actually a very interesting indicator because when you get an alert that about 5 of your friends at the same company have suddenly updated their profile, what has happened? Something is going down. We're not sure what it is, but something is going down, right? So this is the indicators. This information is out in the open. It's public. We're accessing this information. And the question is, how do we take that and bring it into a business use? And you notice, right? Twitter, a few people are looking at it. Maybe I don't have a business use, but LinkedIn has tremendous opportunity, whether it's recruiting, whether it's bringing on the right talent. And imagine if we took LinkedIn one step further where corporations and companies would certify that an individual had worked there. That would be an interesting idea of employment verification. And you might be able to get badges for achievement in LinkedIn to say you accomplished something or you were promoted for something. And that would completely change where the employee record sits. And this is happening very, very quickly. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about social. I'm going to leave you with this primer. But there are a lot of other things that are out there, right? If you think about how these are being used, I'll just let this speak for itself. So you get the power of social networking. This is happening in the enterprise, right? This is how we improve sales cycles. Think about it. We can now collaborate quickly and close a deal. Think about even in finance, we can get accounts receivables down by coordinating information. And that level of internal collaboration is very powerful. So you access a LinkedIn network, you connect with someone else, you bring someone together. We might be able to close deals faster. We might be able to improve recruitment. So this isn't just stuff out there that's, a fad. It's actually changing the way we work and interact. Now mobile is very important. If we think about where mobile's going, think about the number of smartphones. How many of you have one smartphone with you? That's probably everybody in the room. This is a very educated audience. How many have two? Look around. That's about half of you. Anybody have three? All right, no crazy people out there. I have three because I'm in different geographies, so I'm roaming. But this is what's happening. We're carrying a lot of these devices. This is the interface. And by 2015, probably 60 to 70% of the world will be on smartphones. And if you look at those numbers, that is a low-cost way of computing. That's our networking. And about 10 weeks ago, I was roaming the Google offices, unbeknownst to them, but I was roaming the Google offices trying to get a free meal. And what happened was these people were piling phones by the trash can. Big PBX systems, your traditional phones that were sitting by the trash can. And I asked somebody, what's happening here? And they said, oh, we don't need these anymore. The desk phone is dead. They're using all mobile. Think about that. No more desk phones. Everything is being controlled through their mobile phone. And that device, which is a personal device, which is also a business device, is now being used in the enterprise. How many people here are bringing their own devices to work? All right, look around. How many of you guys are scared about the security implications of bringing your own device to work? Think about it. We are bringing our own stuff in, and it is very scary, right? A security breach or something could happen. But this merging between work and home life and personal life is changing, and it's converging, and these devices are also accelerating this. And so we're now used to getting access to this information. We're used to being able to transact on the fly, and I think the worst thing you could do is not put someone in prison, but put someone and take away their devices and leave them in the same room for like 24 hours. They would go insane. You'd have nothing to do. So this is what's happening, and mobile plays a very big role. Now we've talked about cloud. Cloud is a big information store. And I think the thing to remember about cloud is that we can't possibly store all that information anywhere. It's not going to go on a device. It's not going to go in your local data center. All these things are actually going to happen because there's lots of big information stores happening around the world, and you're going to connect data from different places. And basically what we're going to be doing is subscribing to streams of information. And these information streams are going to connect with each other. We're going to find those correlations so that we can get to share that information, chat with other people, and hopefully create some insights around that. And this is where video newsfeed plays a very important role. So when we're having issues and when we're trying to communicate, Skype and YouTube and other video conferencing systems are playing a huge role in terms of reducing the cost of travel, helping with emissions control, helping to also actually improve the flow of information, which then takes us to this point on analytics. Analytics are key to us finding those insights and taking us to the next level. It's not just about getting to real-time analytics. It's going to be more about getting to right-time analytics. Real-time is interesting. We get everything at once. But right-time allows us to get the important information when we need it, because we're going to be flooded with a lot of information. And this brings visualization to the next level. How we imagine all this. We hear about big data, right? How do we pull this unstructured data and information from tweets and blogs and bring that in with our systems of record? But the real question is, how do we create pictures and create new ways to thinking about this? So I'm going to show you a little video. And bear in mind, I don't represent the company that this video is with. It's an advertisement for projectors. But the reason that this is here is because it's taking this kind of information, which could be used in supply chain, which could be used in visualizing markets and demographics, to a whole nother level.
What this is this is a biomedical research facility as well as a medical school. So we have a very large research group. There are different departments within the university, of course, and ours focuses largely on enabling technology in the biological sciences. So things like bioinformatics, genome studies, molecular modeling, protein modeling, things of that nature. The room was conceived as part of the construction of this brand new building. We were very, very fortunate in that we were able to design from the ground up, essentially. And this whole facility came about as a result of a very, very generous donation by Dr. David Coffrin, who was a supporter of our chairman's work, Dr. Hurrell Weinstein, and was really impressed by the quality of work that he was doing and wanted to further that and take that to the next level. So it was his vision, along with our chairman, Dr. Weinstein's, that we built this kind of facility to bring in this information and visualize it in ways that are simply not possible in any other way. We are the only facility of this type in a biomedical research facility. So we're extremely lucky that we have this at our disposal. None of our collaborators in other universities have this kind of technology available to them. And for them, hearing the descriptions of what we're talking about, it's mind-blowing to them. And whenever they come and see it, they're always taken aback by how quickly we're able to present information to them. Really, it boils down to the fact that you are able to envision things that you simply can't in any other way. So for instance, if you're taking things from slice data, you can sit there and you can pour over slice data on a 2D display for days, weeks, months, and not really arrive at a sound conclusion. We can take those same basic images or that same structure and we can reconstruct it here in 3D, which allows you to get a big picture of what's going on very, very quickly without you having to extrapolate out from disparate pieces of data and unify that in one location. You can then interact with it because we have tracking that allows people to move things around and change the perspective in ways that you simply just can't on a desktop. You can't take a slice and turn it around into an object. You can, perhaps, in your head, but you may or may not be right.
Isn't that impressive? I mean, imagine your supply chain data and being able to figure out demand forecasting by centers and geographies in a 3D format, right? And this is really where big data is going, taking massive amounts of information, crunching that, and creating a visualization that you can use. And in this case, that's like a 5-panel display, which allows you to take a 3D cut, right? That's very powerful. Now, not everyone's going to get there. This is probably 4 years out, right? But it gives you an idea of what we can do with data visualization, which really moves us into the next generation. Very powerful stuff. So at the same time this is happening, we've got new rules and new laws of where the CIO is going. This consumerization of IT facet is happening so quickly. And what we're attracted to is really all this stuff on the left-hand side. What you're seeing is consumerization IT. It's simple, right? It's easy to use. There's no manuals. People get on right away. You get on your iPhone, you get on an iPad, nobody looks at a manual. It's scalable. It means you can add users, especially in cloud, without talking to IT. That means you can add users, you can add capacity, and then more importantly, it's sexy, right? It's stuff we get excited about using. It's a small app that really changes your life. It's an application people get excited about. How many of you have been excited about your ERP app in the past year? All right, Steve, all right. But that's the thing, right? How do we get excited about it? How do we get excited about access to the ERP app, right? How do we get excited about how we use that app in a different context? But that's the consumerization of the piece. And I think it's very important to realize that there are a lot of applications out there that look great, that can be easy to use, yet they're not enterprise class. They're consumer grade because they don't do everything on the right-hand side. And when I mean enterprise class, these are the things we have an obligation to do as IT managers. On the right-hand side, that is about being safe, putting a system in the environment without taking another system. It's about being secure, not showing up on the FT for a data breach, right? It's about being sustainable, not the green, fluffy stuff. I'm talking about being able to scale, being able to build on a platform for the next 3 to 5 years. And it's very important as IT managers and stewards of the enterprise to consider both sides of the equation. Because in some cases, you may lean more towards the consumerization side. In other cases, you have to protect the enterprise by being more enterprise grade. And it's a very important balance, and this is one of the things that is shifting and changing in our marketplace. Very, very important to think about this enterprise class piece, because without it, you're going to create a lot of disasters. And we'll talk about it in a little bit. But this drives us to some of the research we did with some of the early adopter CIOs we spoke with. We talked to about 100 CIOs, and there is a new paradigm in terms of this role of the CIO. If you think about just 2 years ago, even 3 years ago, CIOs played a big role. They had multi-million-dollar budgets. They got pretty much full reign of the enterprise, and then the GFC occurred. And it changed a lot of things. And so if we look at this on the left-hand side of being very, very technology savvy, and on the right-hand side of being very business savvy, those are the kind of spectrums that we're seeing. On the top, being externally focused, and on the bottom, being internally focused. The bottom left-hand corner, that is our traditional CIO. That is the Chief Infrastructure Officer. They're trying to get out of the data center. They're trying to reduce cost. They're trying to do more with less, and it's really about getting operational efficiency. That is about as much as 60 to 70% of your organization's budget to keep the lights on. Above that is the Chief Integration Officer. How many of you have gone through mergers and acquisitions in the last 5 years? Okay, a good number. And that's really about connecting these acquisitions together, but more importantly, connecting these acquisitions to suppliers and customers and partners and new types of employees as you extend the value chain. And their budgets are somewhere between 15 and 30% to take care of this integration problem. On the bottom right-hand corner, we have the Chief Information Officer serving as the Chief Intelligence Officer. And that means getting the right information to the right person at the right time on the right security model and, of course, in the right form factor, whether it's a device. And that is also 25 to 30% of the budget. Now, at this point, you're saying, Ray, your math is horrible. We're above 100%. And you're absolutely right, and I'll explain why in a bit. The last piece is the Chief Innovation Officer. And this is someone that could be from the business side, could be from the IT side, could be from a transformation office. And their job is to figure out, where's the new technology? What can we do to impact the business? What can we do to create transformational change? How can we leapfrog the competition? And if you look at this very carefully, what's the left-hand side of the shop look like? That's traditional IT. What's the right-hand side look like? That's shadow IT. Now, how many of you guys are from the IT organization? Raise your hands. How many of you guys are from the business side? Shake hands. Very, very important. I'm going to explain why. Because if shadow IT moves too far ahead, the rest of the organization will collapse because they cannot keep up with the infrastructure. They're already spending 70% of the existing budget on infrastructure and keeping the lights on. Now, if IT got its way, what happens? The business collapses because nothing will get done under standards and structure because business still has to happen. And this is why it's very important that both of you guys work very closely. Because right now we have a huge imbalance moving to the consumerization side. And let's take cloud apps, for example. And it's going to sound funny coming from me, but right now we have what I call cloud best-of-breed hell. Because we have all these cloud applications sitting all over the place. Sometimes IT knows about it. Sometimes IT has no clue that these have been bought. And we're trying to figure out where all this data sits at some point. Sometimes you own the data. Sometimes you don't own the data. And some of these apps are consumer. You're going to have to figure all this out in about 2 years, maybe even sooner. And this is a great example of what's going on. Now, back to the math, right? What is happening? Well, on average, and I'm going to ask you guys, but does this sound right? On average, IT budgets have been cut 5% year over year. Does that sound right? Guess what? Tech spending is up 18 to 22%. Who's got the money? Business. Right? And this is why it's very important, because while the IT budget's being whittled down, the business side is going out and buying iPads, is going out and buying SaaS applications, is testing out new tools, is trying stuff in a very different way. So this imbalance, this swinging of the pendulum back to the business side is going to happen for the next 2 years, and then we'll come back again as we're trying to rationalize what's going on. But let's take a look. Let's see what people are spending on. This is based on data talking about 100 CIOs. 79 really completed these, so we've got some interesting information. What's going on with the Chief Infrastructure Officer? Well, they're thinking about what do we do with cloud and virtualization? How do we reduce costs? And what do we do about these large contracts? How do we make sure my maintenance dollar is getting its value? Right? That's going on in the back of their minds. And it's very familiar. It's a piece that we're all very recognized. The next piece is on the integration side. What's interesting is, keep in mind, these are CIOs that have been through it before. They're realizing that all their problems started with the lack of good master data management and good data quality. So for them, those become the important areas, thinking about connectivity, thinking about SOA. But these are things they realize they're going to have to do even more so because of consumerization of IT. The next piece is really intelligence, and this is really thinking about KPIs, getting data quality standards down, figuring out mobile access. How many guys have had iPads enabled in your organization? Are you guys heroes or what? Right? As soon as you put an iPad on inside an organization, people get excited. They suddenly have a new lease on life, and IT gets 6 months of grace. Right? And so this is the change, right? Getting mobile access and getting people to get there. It's a significant part of the strategy. And then, of course, there's innovation. And people are looking at transformation office. People are looking at trying to balance business and IT priorities. And these then drive the next set. And as you think about these CIOs, there are very few that exist in one individual that can do all four of these things. These are four very distinct skill sets. And what we're seeing on one hand is shadow IT emerging and playing some of these roles. In some cases, traditional IT is in these roles. But if you're in a very large organization, you might have 4 lieutenants, each playing a chief intelligence, a chief integration, a chief infrastructure, and a chief innovation officer role. It's very important that we coordinate, especially given the changes, especially given where we are with consumerization of IT. And it's very important to think about this because your organization's priorities are shifting towards the business side. And more, this coordination is going to be important for our success. And this leads us to the next point, is that these traditional systems that we were using, they were great. They were ERP systems. They kept records neat. They kept transactions in order. They dealt with structured data and information. And they were very reliable. And they were designed for huge amounts of scale. But we are rapidly moving to what we're calling engagement applications. And they're less structured. And they require sense and respond. And they require real-time information. And they have to deal with changes in business processes because how we interact and how we build relationships, how we work with people have changed. And this is what we're starting to call engagement applications. They play 3 big roles. The first one is really about designing around a role-based experience. Things that are much more related to what you do, whether you're an AP clerk, whether you're an HR manager, whether you're actually a supply chain officer, whether you're actually in the field, they're built around your usage. The second thing that's important is that these are really focused around business processes. They tie back to an end in mind. They think about from incident to resolution, from hire to retire, from procure to pay. They are designed to break through functional fiefdoms and solve a business problem, regardless of the department, regardless of how silos of information sit within your organization. And then more importantly, these are designed around community and connectivity. And they're about sharing information, they're about collaboration, they're about self-learning, and more importantly, they have to be secure and safe given the fact that they're working with both external and internal users. So where does this take us? And what you can take a look at, there's actually an article in Harvard Business Review that talks into detail about this, but we are shifting, which we talked about earlier. 5 generations of workers have gone through these 5 and will experience these 5 phases, starting with analog systems to these transaction systems that we're working with in ERP to engagement applications that talk to more social and mobile. But we're going to move past engagement applications. We're going to move to experiential applications, which are different. They're about not just having a communication piece. Today, we're looking at mobile and social as our connectivity, but some of the devices that are bionic, that are built into us, will be part of that. We're also looking at devices that are doing more than sense and respond. They're being pervasive. They can think and predict ahead of what we're going to do. And these are starting to show up as in gamification programs and loyalty programs. If you think about what you do with airline miles and how people anticipate what's next. And then, of course, more importantly, this information goes back to this concept of right time. Making sure we're not flooded with tons of information, but focused on the information that's important at that moment, and that information being surfaced to us. And as you can tell, that is much harder than giving a stream of real-time information. And then after that, we're going to move into a world of what we call personal fulfillment systems. And what I mean by that is, today, imagine your trip here to Birmingham. You had to go out and book travel on your own. You had to book an airline ticket. You had to book a train ticket. You had to book a hotel room. You had to register. Imagine if you can go out and said, I want to stay in a hotel in this criteria. I want to fly on this airline. I want to pay only this price, and I want this seat. And you put a bid out there, and someone came back with an answer for you. And all you had to do is transact against that. That's where we're headed. And that's an area where people are pioneering called vendor relationship management, or VRM, or personal data stores. And if we move and make that transition, you'll see we've gone from enterprise to consumer very, very rapidly in the next 10 years. And one could say maybe B2B and B2C are dead. They don't matter anymore because people are now looking at the context of the individual and their role and when they transact. And this is why contextual information becomes very important. Now, this seems like a far way from where we are today, sitting with our existing systems. But I think it's a great way to think about the future and where these applications are going. And it's not just applications. It's devices. It's larger sets of technology. And this is really the shift that's happening with these systems. Now, a little bit about where we are with SAP. And we all have seen these different issues. We know that we've got different priorities. We have to grow the business, and then we're told, cut costs, save money. It's a little schizoid. Then we go out and say, hey, let's go innovate. And then people say, oh, no, you can't do that. We've got regulations, and the legal department comes into play. Right? So we're stretched on multiple fronts, and we're stretched using the existing systems we have. And so there have always been three things, and this comes from a report that we will make free, I believe, Alan, to the members area. It's our optimization solutions on SAP. And one of the things that's really about trying to balance this cost of ownership, brittle infrastructure that's going on within your own internal systems, and also thinking about what the complexity looks like. Now, what's important to note is this is not just a problem SAP users face. This is a problem all ERP users face. And if you look at the top three things that are going on here, the first one is reduce the cost of ownership and complexity. Right? That 70% we talk about that a chief infrastructure officer is spending, they're trying to figure out how do I reduce that cost. And then more importantly, it's how do I do things like get into mobility? How do I get to self-service BI? What do we do about maintenance costs? How do I integrate with new systems? That's what the ERP users are facing, and everybody's in the same boat. If you look at SAP users, and this comes from, I think about 200, we'll see. Oh, this is 100 of the SAP users. And what we're seeing here is really same thing, right? We drive down the cost, get me to BI, help me get to mobile, help me connect to these different systems, because all this stuff is happening around me, and my business users are really mad at me at the moment, and I got to get something done. And this is the simple translation of this data. And we're all feeling this, and I see people nodding their heads as well. So the way to get there, there's four ways. And believe it or not, it's actually divided fairly evenly between these four ways to get to optimization. The first one is to say, we have no money, screw it, we're going to hold what we have, we'll make incremental changes, we're not going to do the upgrades. Right? Okay, that's very fair. Right? Stay with the status quo, let's wait till the economic conditions change, we have no big drivers, I got to do this other three projects first. And that's happening in the marketplace. And so you see there's a continuum between let's quickly modernize and let's stay with what's going on. And let's go with 100% I'm going to be an SAP shop, or I'm going to know and start adding other things within my SAP four walls. Very important. So the second level we see people get to is I'm going to be on shiny new SAP. I'm going to upgrade everything. I'm going to take every enhancement pack. I'm going to go to every latest release. And I'm going to be 100% SAP shop. Also a very valid strategy, and people are going and doing that as well, and then they're getting to the next release where they can. On the other hand, we also have people that are saying, screw it, we're holding status quo, we're not going to make any changes, but we're going to add new stuff and incremental functionality. I've got these point-of-solution SaaS apps, maybe I need to change what's going on in my subsidiaries, and so there are two-tier ERP strategies, there are SaaS integration strategies, or cloud integration that's occurring. You can do that with SAP, or you can do that outside of SAP. And depending on what your views are, you see the changes. And that's what's on in the upper right-hand corner is modernize SAP and surround with best-of-breed apps. Some people are upgrading SAP and also making that modernization effort to go somewhere else. Four valid strategies. You just have to think about where you are in the organization, how much money you have, what your business priorities are, which are much more important, and how you want to get there. Now, a great way to think about this is figuring out legacy optimization, right? Where can you go out and innovate and save and cut costs on SAP. And there are a wide range of solutions. It's all around the life cycle of what you do, from when you buy the software or select it, to when you implement it, to when you maintain it, to when you own it, and when you think about the next cycle. Right? And each one of these, there are different sets of solutions. And there are about 8 that are important, from anywhere from application extensibility. There's some vendors here, I might not have seen all the different vendors that are here, but some are allowing you to go out and use Excel as your primary interface and never get into an SAP environment. Or use Adobe Forms, right? And build everything there and your users will never have to touch anything. Or try some of these mobile access vendors that are going in and using mobility as the interface and changing the whole SAP user experience for the business users. And in fact, if you get usability correct, people get excited about the applications again, right? And I saw a number of vendors here that are providing mobile access. Those don't look like SAP screens, right? People are really excited. You know, you put anything on an iPad, everything looks great, right? But it is amazing, right? You can go in and users and business users will gravitate to that, and that drives adoption. There are also application lifecycle management tools for testing and data management and masking and being able to do copy, right? Those are very important tools. I think you saw the men dressed very well. They're part of a company that does that as well from the demo jam. But I think it's very important, right? These are tools that actually make you more efficient at running SAP. Another good tool that's actually from SAP, and people probably don't know much about it, is there's a prediction tool for enhancement packs. Test it out. It's great. It tells you what you need, what you've run. It's a great tool that's out there that very few people have gone out and downloaded. But if you try it, it tells you exactly what things you need, what modules you need when you go to upgrades. And these things help accelerate your use, but also drive some cost savings for you, right? If you can reduce testing down from 30 days to 15 days, think about the cost savings. If you can reduce the data store required for test data management and the amount of masking that you have to do for privacy, think about the legal implications and the amount of risk that's gone as you do offshore testing. So all these things play a big role. Now, of course, archiving and storage play another role in terms of compression, license management optimization, figuring out how many licenses are you really using? How many of you guys really know how many licenses you're using? Raise your hands. That's not bad. OK, we got about 10 people. That's actually not bad. So those are things like that. And then office productivity integration, whether you're using Notes, whether you're using Outlook, right? Being able to tie back to any one of those tools that are there. And then, of course, there's third-party maintenance and virtualization. Now, there's something that's not on here that I should talk about, too, is database. It's sacrilegious because in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to be back here at the Oracle User Conference speaking. But let me tell you what. If you get off Oracle database, you will save yourself a bundle. Now, how many of you are willing to get off Oracle database? Very few of you. Now, I know there's an Oracle sponsor in here, so please don't shoot me. And I'll explain why. Because you're paying for high availability, you're paying for a test instance, you're paying for the fact that you can't virtualize, and the fact that you can actually switch to DB2 or SQL Server or maybe Sybase and get some huge savings. Problem is, nobody that's an Oracle DBA wants to get off, right? That's the challenge, and I recognize that. But those are places where you can go out and get some massive savings because none of you are really using the full Oracle database capabilities. In fact, you're just really storing data there and paying a lot for it. And that's something to think about. And so these are the kind of things that people are doing. We see this creativity occurring because people want to innovate. There's all this exciting stuff out there, and if we don't figure out the savings, we can't go out and innovate. Now, a couple things that are happening on the SAP front. We talked about these 5 big forces. And 3 of them are being addressed by SAP directly, and 2 are getting there, right? The first one is mobility. Of course, we're seeing that with the Sybase acquisition, but we're also seeing it among the innovation partners and the consulting firms and the system integrators that are out there building on top, trying to get information out of SAP. The second area is cloud. We're seeing BYD traction. We're seeing some very well-designed line of business applications, whether it's sales on demand, talent, career, things I probably saw that I probably shouldn't have seen, but they're exciting. They're done in a different way. And then, of course, the last piece is really analytics and what we're doing in that area. Of course, talking about HANA and talking about business objects. Social, there's Streamworks, but we actually think SAP may have to make an acquisition to make social work. In fact, we think something is going down in the next few weeks, but we'll find out, right? But social is very important because that's the connectivity piece that's important. The video and UC piece, that's going to happen from your contact center or from someone else, or maybe you'll just get on Skype, or maybe you go to Microsoft and do Lync or something like that. But we're seeing that these pieces are happening in concert. So what about site-based mobility? I think it's an important thing to think about that there are multiple parts to Sybase Mobility, as you can tell from the wonderful diagrams that they've crafted. But the key thing is mobile device management is going to become very huge. And one of the products that's a leader in the space is Afaria. And what Afaria lets you do, it addresses that security issue about devices being out there, bringing your own iPad, bringing your own mobile device. How do you get some control over it? How do you wipe that data if someone loses it? Right? The last thing you want to be is on the front page of the newspaper saying, major data breach occurred at your company. Right? So this is the point. If we're going to have consumerization of IT, we need a balance. Now, all the other mobility aspects you have to start thinking about, is mobile going to be your primary interface? If it is your primary interface, how quickly are you going to just get rid of these apps? Think about it. Apps are now disposable on a mobile device. You just download the next version and jump on, right? So think about your use cases. Think about how much you really need to go deep on an application. In some cases, that's where Sybase makes sense. In some cases, you need something to get up and quick and running, and you don't worry about that back-end infrastructure. So there are trade-offs to think about in the mobility strategy. And there's some vendors that are really good at making this happen very quickly, and others that go very, very deep and building a whole bunch of infrastructure that potentially could be thrown out, or potentially could be something that you save. And this is why it's very important to think through the use cases. And this is really all about experiences. Because if you are trying to recreate your SAP experience on a mobile device, I'll tell you what, give up, don't do it. It's not the way to go. You're supposed to come back and think about the mobile use case and how a mobile worker will use that information and rebuild something. That's when you're going to be successful on both adoption and also in terms of making sure that these applications are used heavily. The next piece is really line of business applications. Now, this is the part where I get really excited, because when you think about the point solutions that have emerged in the marketplace, either in HR and recruiting and talent, incentive comp, time and expense, and career, that's where a lot of advantages are happening. And these things are happening in the cloud. No one's going out and buying an on-premise app to do these things. And one of the things that SAP did really well here is really gone through the design thinking, built out use cases and roles and say, if I was a travel and expense person and I was a major executive or someone that was a casual traveler or I was doing something on a temporary basis, that's where it gets very interesting, right? They've built this design paradigms into the software, right? It might not cover everything traditionally in a place in travel and expense. Sales might not be 100% mapping to the sales CRM product, but it's going down specific use cases. And back to this notion of engagement applications, applications that are more social, back to this notion that applications that are disposable, these are things that you can drop in, drop out, and then pull another application up. And we're rapidly moving in that direction. BYD, on the other hand, we're seeing use cases. Finally, you can use business by design in your subsidiaries. Consolidate all the other crap that you have and put it on BYD is what the SAP execs would love you to hear. You could also do that on something else. But the point is, you now have a mechanism to do that. And where you can take advantage of the cloud and subsidiaries, BYD plays that role. You can also look at it as probably a stepping stone to getting to infrastructure consolidation, instance consolidation, and another way to drive down the cost structure. The last one is BobJ and analytics. BobJ, definitely much more superior to what you got out of the original SAP system, but a lot of alternatives out there, depending what you want to do. BobJ is a lot of infrastructure, but if you're just trying to get to short-term data, people are going to different tools. But if you really want a deeper integration or deeper set of capabilities, people look at business objects. HANA, on the other hand, is, you'll probably hear a lot about it if you've come from Sapphire. HANA, on the other hand, is interesting. We leave it at that point. From an analyst point of view, we think that there's a lot of potential with HANA, but we don't think it's completely built out yet. But here's the key. You are early. And because you are early, you have SAP's attention if you go out and adopt this. So if you want to try the most crazy but use case, try it. The SAP execs are more than willing to do the POCs from what we see. Taking massive amounts of data, mashing them up, trying to get to different information, because they want to prove that this thing works. But more importantly, HANA, which technically stands for Hasso's Next Generation Architecture, if you look at HANA, basically what it is that's the future base of SAP. That's where the next gen applications will probably be built on, because in memory is where people are headed, Cloud is where people are headed. These applications have to handle unstructured data. And so this is going to be the foundation. So I think you're only seeing a small piece of the larger roadmap of the future. You're not going to get it all at once, but if you start adopting incremental pieces, it'll make a lot of sense. So this is the 3 areas that we see SAP moving towards innovation quickly. We'll see if they buy a social vendor. But I think it's very important to think about this context that they are moving in that direction. You have to think about your use cases and where you want to go. Now that brings us to a larger point that's important, which is really about technology adoption and where you think about technology adoption. There needs to be a framework for you to be successful. And we've got a methodology that people use all the time. It's called DEEPer. And really there are 5 phases of this as you go out and bring new technologies and new disruptive technologies into the organization. The first one is D, which is discovery. Right? Discovery is really about testing it out, getting executive sponsorship in place. The next one is really focused on experimentation. And when we're talking about experimentation, we're talking about trying it out in the department, pushing it out, figuring out what the KPIs are. And then what we're trying to do is get us into the next stage. And I'll share with you some of those. This is really about evangelization, right? Taking it out there, making sure that there's support behind it, making sure that there's internal collaboration that's built around this. And then, of course, getting to pervasiveness. This is about scaling. It's about getting it deeper into the system, into the organization, so that you can be successful. It's also about getting this into the budgets. Because if you're not in the budgets, it doesn't matter. You know that. And so it's about building a budget case for this. And then the last piece is really about realization. This is where you go out and create innovation teams and information governments around innovation, building business and technology teams together. Now, the reason that this is a powerful framework is because if you follow each of these steps, you'll be able to go through this succession very easily. Why? Because in the very beginning, you went out and got executive sponsorship. And you bring out executives to see what's possible. You're breaking down all the fluffy, hand-waving things about all the latest fads. And now you have someone that's in there that's vested. And hopefully it's a business side executive or an IT side executive with business influence. In the second phase, what you're doing very importantly is you're starting out with what we call the end in mind. How many of you guys have heard of Stephen Covey? 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? So, very interesting book. It's a business book. But one of the rules is begin with the end in mind. Think about where you want to be. Take those metrics and move to the next level. Figure out what you want to move the needle on. And in that level, and in phase 2, you're going out and figuring out the KPIs. You're figuring out how do we go out and take this to the next level. And if you have that, you now have a business case to get you to phase 3, which is about getting this into budgets and getting this into collaboration, getting teams to work with this so you can start choosing the right tools. And then when you get to phase 4, you now have a budget plan. People are used to having this. And it's about, hey, that worked really well in a department. Good job with the pilot. Let's get this into the rest of the enterprise. Let's move it from the enterprise and get it into the rest of the value chain. Maybe we extend it out to some partners. Maybe we push this out within some suppliers. Maybe we give this to customers to use on their own. And that's really where you're getting a lot of this leverage as you extend the capabilities out to someone else. The last piece is important because we talked about pace of change. We talked about consumerization of IT. We talked about how all these things are happening so quickly. One of the things you need inside your organization is a governance team figuring out which technologies you'd adapt and which technologies you pass on. Odds are you're going to pass on 9 out of 10 of the technologies that come across the plate. But you need to understand why and what business case. And people have to be on the same page. Otherwise, we have what we go back to is cloud best of breed hell, right? I mean, and this is a very interesting point because about 5 months ago, we were at an organization and we went out and said, look, you know, how many of you guys have cloud applications? And we interviewed these CIOs. And we did this last year too, but this year we did it just out of fun because we figured we'd probably get to different results. But we didn't. We talked to 50 CIOs, and 20 of them said, we have cloud applications. And I said, okay, that's kind of interesting. We went to the procurement office. Very good place to start. We went to the procurement office and asked those same 50 companies, guess what? How many had cloud applications? All 50. Right? Now, if that's happening and the CIO doesn't know what's going on, you're starting to have a little issue because next thing you know, people are going to have requirements for integration. Next thing you go, how do I take this data from one system and connect it with the next system? And this is why it's important to have this governance up front. And to be really successful, you're going to need that partnership between business and IT, between governance, looking at innovation, tying that back to the business to be successful. So where do we go with this? Well, organizations are all facing the same 3 challenges. And the question is, how do we get there faster? And the first one is really lots and lots of disruptive technologies, all very appealing, all very interesting, all having a business case. And which ones do we go out and use? How do we pay for this? This is the legacy optimization, so we can create funds for innovation. But more importantly, in the bottom left-hand corner is really looking about how do we tie this to business models? Because if we don't tie it to new business models, we're not going to get the business value. And so I encourage you to think about things this way. How do we take a new process or a new technology and apply it back into the organization so we can create something new, a new service or a new approach to something? Great way to look at it, if you're in the US, you fly Virgin America, very interesting experience. Same boring industry called airlines. But they've managed to transform that in how they use technology. You get on the flight. You order everything through the in-flight entertainment system for your food, and things show up. You order your movies. You order your internet. You have a complete new transaction engine on the back of a seat. People are happy. People are excited to get on the planes again. So think about where you can create some transformations in the business model, and then tie back the processes, and then tie back the technologies. The technologies come last, but they're very important because they create these new transformational experiences. But without the context of business value, you won't be successful. And this is where we come back to business value, because whatever you do, think about the context of being able to grab this and take something and evangelize it into the value chain. And the more you do that, the more you can reduce the cost of IT and delivery of that technology. So we've talked about consumerization of IT, the massive amount of changes, the new role that CIOs are facing to address these changes, what's happening in the marketplace as we move from transactional applications to engagement applications. We've talked about what this means for an SAP user. We've talked about how you can create some opportunities to find funds for innovation. And more importantly, we've left you with a framework that you can take with and think about as you look at all these different disruptive technologies. So with that, I'm going to thank you for your time and take any Q&A. I think we still have time. So thank you very much.